today I'm going to continue talking about financial instruments, which we talked a bit about last time. Last time we did forward contracts. Today I'll show you a couple more complicated instruments, and two of them are specifically focused on demand response. So callable forward contracts and contracts for reliability are in financial instruments you can use for creating demand response, bringing consumers into the market. Financial transmission rights are designed to deal with locational marginal pricing differences. And so I don't know if we will have time to talk about reliability contracts, but if not, I'll cover it next time. Okay, so starting with financial transmission rights, I'm gonna remind you how forward contracts work. We talked about it last time. And then I'm gonna explain why they're not enough to do hedging in markets with locational marginal prices. So if you remember, the whole idea about forward contracts was that we wanted to agree in a bilateral trade at a fixed price way before the actual day that the power is going to be traded. So if we wanted, for example, to agree on a $40 per megawatt hour trading price, we can, a buyer and a seller can enter into a forward contract. Why would you want to do that? Because the real-time market is very uncertain. If I'm investing in a generator and I want to make sure that the investment is worth the cost, it's not enough sometimes to rely on what you think will happen with real-time prices. So in order to make sure that you will get your investment capital back, you might, as a producer, you might want to go out there and find a big buyer who's willing to buy your power in advance for a price that you both can agree on, instead of hoping you will sell it in the real-time market at a high enough price. So that's the goal of forward contracts. So let's remember how they work. We have a generator and a load, and they want to trade a certain quantity. Here it's 400 megawatts at a certain price that they want to agree bilaterally in advance. So the way a forward contract works is that the generator sells the contract to the buyer for that price, and the moment the contract is sold, it creates the obligation for the seller of the contract to pay back the buyer the real-time price at the day of delivery, which is the expiration date. So let's see in this specific example what's going on. The producer sells the forward contract for the forward contract price times the quantity that the two want to trade. The load buys the contract years in advance of production, and when real time comes, they both go into the market. They buy, well, the generator sells to the market, the consumer buys from the market, but then they both engage in the forward contract, and the forward contract creates the obligation for the generator to pay the load the real-time price. So I had drawn this figure in the last lecture, if you remember. Where the load pays the generator the forward price in the past, and then in real time the generator pays the load the real-time price. So you can see how this basically enables both of these parties, the buyer and the seller, to end up exchanging power for $40 per megawatt hour, as if the market did not exist. The market really exists, but this contract, this piece of paper, creates a net effect as if the market doesn't exist. Okay. So in real time, the producer, so the real-time price ends up being higher than the price of the forward contract, but the producer gets $50 per megawatt hour for producing in the real-time market, but then settles his forward contract, so these two terms cancel out and you only have the forward trade remaining. And the other way around, the load pays the real-time price to consume the power, but then receives the money from the generator from the forward contract, and it's as if the real-time market did not exist, right? That was the idea of the forward contract. Okay, now this is going to work perfectly fine in a market without LMGs, without locational marginal pricing. But if you remember, a few lectures ago we talked about locational marginal pricing, where different buses might have different prices. And in those situations, the forward contract is not good enough to achieve this trade over here. So if generator A is located in one location and generator B is located in a different location, the two will trade a forward contract. A forward contract is always associated with a specific commodity. In this market, we have two commodities. We have electricity in area A and in area B. So you want to sign a forward contract? Sure, but you have to agree for which area. So for example, if they trade a forward contract for area A, then here's what's going to happen. Suppose that in real time, the actual price in area A is cheaper than the actual price in area B. $36 in area A, $45 in area B. Then what's going to happen is when the forward contract is originally signed, the seller receives $40 per megawatt hour. The buyer of the contract pays $40 per megawatt hour to the seller. But in real time, the buyer is hurt. Because in real time, oh, by the way, the forward contract, yeah, I mentioned that earlier. The forward contract is for power in area A. So in real time, the producer is going to get the price for their area, $36. And because they've engaged in a forward contract, they also have to pay that price to the buyer that they sold the contract to. So from the producer's point of view, nothing changed. It's because they agreed for a forward contract in the producer's location, the producer gets what they want. They get to sell power at $40 per megawatt hour. But the load is hurt because the load buys power and they're billed the local price, 45, and receives some compensation from the seller, but it's not that local price, it's the price in the other area. So they are actually receiving $9 less per megawatt hour from the forward contract. The message here is that forward contracts are good enough for hedging trades in a market without locational marginal pricing, but if you have different prices in different locations, forward contracts are not enough to make the trade without risk. Is this clear? Yeah.
Just the load is in the area B?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Correct. Okay. Now, when people started designing, restructuring electricity markets, one of the first things they started thinking about is also how financial markets would work around electricity markets. So one of the original ideas was, okay, basically to solve this problem that I just described to you, you somehow want to create a right for the generator to get power from the location for the load to get power from the location of the generator. So you need to create some kind of financial instrument that gives you the right to use the line in real time. So when electricity markets were originally designed, one idea was, let's create a financial instrument that gives the load the right to buy in advance, years before, the path from A to B. And that way, if the load can buy the right to use the path from A to B, plus a forward contract, then they can secure a trade years before real time. The problem with buying rights to paths is that how much of the path is available depends on production and consumption in the entire network. These are not highways where you know how many cars can fit in a highway. In electricity networks, how many electrons can fit through a certain line depends on what everyone is doing with the network because of Kirchhoff's law. And so you cannot predetermine paths and certain quantities of rights to the paths. And we saw this example a few lectures ago, but I'll repeat it here to refresh your memory, to highlight what the issue is and why we cannot work with paths over the network. So this is an example, okay, some history about the work in this area. Bill Hogan was the one to propose an alternative, which are financial transmission rights, and this is taken from a paper that he published back in 1992. So here's the issue with paths. Suppose you have this 3-node network, and we've seen this example before. We have a generator in location A and in location 1 and 2, and a load in location 3. But this line over here has a limit of 600 megawatts. The assumption is that the network is symmetric, so when we're shipping 1 megawatt of power from 1 to 3, 2/3 of that megawatt will flow through line 1-3, and the other third will take the long way from node 1 to 2, and then 2 to 3. So the question is, suppose you wanted to split this network into a generator area and a load area, and define rights to use the lines. You could, the question is, how many rights would you want to issue? How many megawatts of rights do you want to give to people, and give them also the guarantee that when real time comes, they can use that many megawatts to send power from the production zone to the consumption zone. So you can propose 2 different things here, and both will be wrong. One option is to issue 900 megawatts of rights. Now, this will keep engineers happy, because engineers, what's the most stressful situation that can occur for this network? Generator 1 producing or generator 2? There's only one line that has a limit. Which production is more stressful for that line? Remember,
that's one.
1, exactly.
Because you have 600 and you achieve 600 quickly, more quickly.
From 1.
From 1.
Exactly. For this guy, every megawatt splits 2/3, 1/3. So it's half as stressful as production from one. So issuing 900 megawatts of rights means that no matter who produces in this network, one or two, we're fine. If one produces, 600 megawatts that are going to go through line 1-3. If two produces, it's going to be 300 megawatts. So definitely the line we can't fry the line with 900 megawatts. Well, so that'll keep engineers happy because you create a financial market years in advance where you issue so many rights that you make sure that you don't destroy the line, which keeps, again, the engineers happy. But the economists are going to step in and say, well, but that way, if this guy were cheaper and they wanted to buy more rights, they wouldn't fry the line. But you're not letting them buy more rights. They could buy up to 1,800 megawatts of rights without destroying the line. So if these guys are cheaper, you're keeping them out of the financial derivatives market. So there's a tension here, and nobody's right. So what the economists would say is, no, you should issue 1,800 megawatts of rights, so that if these guys are cheaper, they can buy the rights. But then the engineers are going to say, if generator 1 buys the rights, then they're going to destroy the line. So nobody's right, and it's nobody's fault that nobody's right. It's the way we've defined the rights. You cannot think of rights to send power from one zone to another. So what Bill Hogan proposed instead is financial transmission rights, and they are different from what I described to you. The idea of Hogan is you buy the right to ship from one node in the network to another node in the network. How the power gets there, we don't know. This is the way we define the rights, as right to ship from node 1 from one node to another node. So this is the definition of the financial instrument. Before real time, which is indicated as capital T, and now the seller of this contract is the system operator. Before real time, the system operator sells financial transmission rights and the definition of this is associated with two locations, location A and location B. And there is also an expiration date associated with this contract. When a buyer buys a financial transmission right, they basically buy a payment in real time from the system operator equal to the price difference times the quantity of the contract that was bought. So let's see how this will now help us solve this bilateral trading example. Basically, you can already see how it's going to help. This payment is the price difference. And in the example I showed you earlier, what ended up happening was that the load paid for the price difference. So what the load will want to do in this situation is buy also an FTR to send power from location A to location B. So here's how this is going to work. There's a generator in A and a load in B. They want to trade power in a price that is known in advance. So they will now use two instruments to achieve this. One is the same as before. A forward contract for A to sell to B at a price $40, which is the price they want to trade in. But also what the load has to do in the situation is also buy an FTR to ship power from A to B. And here's why that will resolve the issue. The FTR will pay the load price B minus price A times the 400 megawatts. This money is going to be paid from the system operator. Again, the system operator is the one that is selling the FTRs. The system operator is the one that pays for the FTRs in real time. Okay, so forward contract plus FTR. From the point of view of the load, what happens is the load buys at $40 per megawatt hour before real time. In real time, the load consumes 400 megawatts and pays the real time price, which is high, it's 45. In real time, the load receives a payment from the seller, from the generator, of $36, which is the forward price at area A. And also in real time, the load receives an FTR payment, which is exactly this shortage that came up earlier. So these terms cancel out with each other, and what ends up happening is that the load buys power at 40, which is exactly what these two wanted to achieve, is to trade power at 40. Again, the thing to notice here is that the forward contracts and the FTRs are bought years in advance. But by buying them years in advance, these two can make sure they trade power at $40 in real time, as if the market did not exist. Okay, that's the idea. You combine FTRs and forwards to trade power at a fixed price that you choose. Any questions? Looks clear? Okay. And there's a bunch of nice things about FTRs. I'm going to spend about a slide or two to explain each of them. This first one, I've kind of talked a lot about it already. So you can do bilateral trade as if the market did not exist, but at the same time, you can, the FTRs don't, although they can hedge you from risk, they also give you the opportunity to profit from a real-time situation. So they do not destroy the fact that you've secured a trade at a fixed price in the past. Does not mean we cannot profit from the market in real time. If conditions are good, we can still hold the contract, but also do profitable movements in the real-time market. So you get the hedging in the past as a bonus, basically. And the third thing is you can easily integrate these contracts with how the system is operated, so you don't need to reinvent markets, and it's easy to sell this to the people that are responsible for operating the system from day to day. And also there's a revenue adequacy result that I will discuss in more detail. Okay, so first feature, bilateral trade. We kind of saw it already in the example. If you put down the calculations, you will see that the payments that go from generator and to load and from system operator to load cancel out. So when you have forward plus FTR, the producer receives FT in the past, receives PA in real time, and pays PA in real time. So it's left with FT times X, exactly what they wanted to achieve. The consumer buys the FTR and the forward, so they pay FT in the past, they pay PB in real time to consume, they are paid PA from the settlement of the forward, and they're paid this amount from the FTR settlement. So these three go away, and they're left with the payment of the forward. So this trade takes place when you have forward with FTR. Now, although you can perfectly hedge risk using FTR plus forward, that doesn't mean that you can't profit from real-time conditions. Let's think of what the incentives are in real time. So from the point of view of consumers, if you add up all these four terms, the cash flow you get is this over here. Now I've changed a slight thing in this cash flow. It's the third term. It's this term over here. In real time, a load that has bought forward plus FTR can decide how much to consume. They have two contracts in their closet, a forward and an FTR, but those contracts don't say anything about how much they actually need to consume in real time. They just guarantee some cash coming in real time. So, in terms of real-time consumption, how many of these terms here can still change in real time? This is the forward payment that was paid when the contract was bought. This is the settlement of the forward contract. These are the FTR payments, and this is the money paid in the spot, in the real-time market. So which one of these four terms can change in real time? The third one. And what you see is that this decision queue is as a load, when I'm doing optimization of my consumption, whether I had the contracts or not, it's the same thing. This drops out as a fixed term, and I see the entire price hitting my consumption decision. So the forward contracts influence my cash flow, but in real time, it's exactly as if they did not exist. And that means that basically, if loads are smart, they're going to behave in the real-time market as they would have behaved if they didn't have the contract. So, for example, if PB is really low, they might want to consume Q, which is bigger than X. Nobody tells them that you need to consume X. They can go above it if the price is really cheap. But at the same time, if they choose to consume Q equals exactly to X, then they're left with this FT times X, so they can completely hedge risk or do better. That's the message here. Okay, so the third characteristic of FTRs that I wanted to discuss is revenue adequacy. So this is how the world looks in a universe without FTR, but in a market with LMPs, I also showed you another cash flow, which is the ISO paying loads the FTR payment. And so every hour of the day, we're going to clear the real-time market, and every hour of the day, depending on what FTR obligations the ISO has, they need to be paying FTR holders that money. By the way, it's not necessarily the case that loads have to buy FTRs. Anybody can buy FTRs. Producers can buy FTRs. Banks can buy FTRs. Anyone can enter the FTR market. The question is, where is the ISO going to find this money? And now this money comes from the leftover money from the real-time auction. If you remember, the way LMP auctions work is this load pays its local price times the quantity it consumes. This generator is paid its local price times the quantity it consumes. If these prices are different, there's some money left on the table, right? So, for example, in an LMP market where we're shipping 400 from A to B, and the price here is 45, and here it's 36, how much money is left on the table from the auction?
9 times 400.
Is it 9 or minus 9? It's a trick question. It could be 9. It could be 9. Does the ISO have money in its pocket, or does it own money?
It has money.
It has money, yeah. And these guys are receiving less cash than these guys are paying. Okay, so in the end of this auction, the ISO is left with plus $3,600. Okay. Now, there's also an FTR here that needs to be paid, and coincidentally, it's exactly equal to that money. So the idea is you pay FTR obligations using the extra money left from the auction. What Hogan showed when he proposed FTRs is that the amount of money that the ISO has to pay to FTR holders can be covered from the leftover money from the auction. So by introducing this contract, you're not making the ISO bankrupt. Okay, that's
But who fixed the cost of the ISO, of the FTR.
You,
You have
yeah.
difference in real time, but you have the forward contract before, so you never know how much you will have at this time. And when do you pay the FTR payment?
You pay the FTR payments in real time.
Okay.
Now, from the point of view of the ISO does not care at all about forward contracts because the ISO doesn't have any obligation to interfere with forward contract. So the cash, so what the ISO cares about is the FTR payments. How much cash these will pay depends on the outcome of the auction. But I can guarantee to you that the extra cash from the auction will be enough to pay the FTR payments.
Okay, because it could be an independent structure who fix the cost of the FTR, and at the moment you never know how much.
You cannot fix the amount of payment of the FTR. It depends on the price differences in real time. Nobody. That's the whole idea, that it follows the market so that you can achieve risk hedging. So, does that help? Does that answer your question?
Yes, I understand, but I thought there were a third factor in the business who fixed the price of the FTR, and so at this moment you never know. But you told me that the price is fixed by the market between the generator and the block,
So, to your question, you have a good point here. So, what can happen in practice, there's not a third actor, but there is a secondary market here for FTRs. Now, if you think about this market, what happens is, here is real time. About a year to 5 years before real time, the ISO will set up an auction to sell FTR rights. The moment that auction finishes, you have a secondary market for FTRs. So the moment the ISO, 5 years in advance, sells out FTR rights, they have created an obligation to pay people in real time. Now, I might be JP Morgan and I might bid to buy an FTR, I might get it in the auction. Then I have the right to sell it to other people. So we track who holds the FTR. But this FTR market can be operated completely independently from the ISOs. The ISO, the only thing they need to worry about is money they need to pay in real time. The bottom line is that the auction, the energy market auction that will run in real time will finance the FTRs. It'll be enough to pay for the FTRs. Okay. Now, how much money was transferred in the secondary market and who paid whom doesn't really matter to the ISO. The ISO just worries about this transfer over here. Now, let's see why this result holds. And I'm afraid I will return you a bit to KKT conditions for OPFs, but it will be really short. So this is a reminder of, we will have to use the OPF KKT conditions to prove the result. This is the KKT system for the OPF problem. So energy balance, definition of flows. If you remember, these are the PTDFs. This is the definition of the net injection in a bus, which is production minus demand in that bus. We have demand has to be less than or equal to the demand bit and an associated dual multiplier. Production has to be less than or equal to the max run capacity and an associated dual multiplier. And then we have these limits on flows over lines in the positive direction and the negative direction. and the associated dual multipliers. And then we have these dual feasibility conditions as well as these dual feasibility conditions over here. I hope this does not look like Chinese to you. Kind of rings a bell? Or do you have any questions about the notation? What is what? Here? Okay. And so this is the set of KKT conditions for this auction that will run in real time. So here's what we want to show. What we want to show is that FTR payments will be less than the auction payments. Okay, here's the auction payments. To see this, maybe it's helpful to look at this example here. I'm claiming that the auction payments are LMPs times net injection, but the negative of that. What is the net injection here? Use example 400 or minus 400. It's production minus consumption. So it's 400 and minus 400 here. So I multiply the LMP times 400, but this is something I'm paying to the generator. So if the net injection is positive, the actual payment, the revenue to the auction is minus rho times R. Okay. The load is minus, the net injection is minus 400, but it's a payment that the load makes, so I put a minus sign. That's the payment of the auction. So this is the amount of cash that the system operator collects in real time. What's the important thing to note here is that it's the solution of the KKT system. So the stars here indicate optimal solutions to this KKT system. So it's the primal optimal solution for injections times the primal optimal dual multiplier for that location. On the other hand, the FTRs, when we ran the auction in the past, we wanted to make sure that the FTRs we issue are feasible for the network. So basically, okay, first of all, the FTR payments, I'm summing over all lines in the network, the LMP difference of the lines times the amount of flow over the lines. That's just by definition of FTR. So in this example here, there is only a single line. So the FTR payments is the row at the destination minus the row at the source times the flow over that line. The one thing that so this is the formula for computing FTR payments, but the F is not necessarily an optimal flow for the network. It's just a feasible flow for the network. Okay. Is it clear why this is the formula for FTR payments? I'm going through all the lines. So, for example, if I had a third line over here, I would also have to sum the LMP difference times the flow on this line, plus the LMP difference times the flow on this line. Okay, that's the F vector. But the F vector, the way this auction is cleared, make sure that you have, you're giving away rights to people, but you want to make sure that the rights you give away are feasible for your network. But they don't have to be optimal, but they need to be feasible. So what we basically want to show in mathematical terms is that this inequality holds over here. Revenue from auction minus FTR payments is a non-negative quantity. Okay. So here's how you get that. The revenue from the auction is this thing here. If we replace the row from this formula over here, we get this term over here. Why does this thing go away in the next equality? If I split the sum into two, the phi is constant, it goes out of the summation, so you're left with summing over net injections, which have to be 0. Okay, so this term goes away. Now, we've shown this identity that the auction cash is basically equal to this thing here. Now, for the FTR payments, this is the original formula, but it's equal to, if you think about it, it's equal to exactly this quantity here. So in our two-node example over here, I can think of FTR payments as the flow over line AB times rho B minus rho A, but this is exactly equal to minus net injection, rho A times net injection in bus A minus rho B times net injection in bus B. It's exactly equal because we're looking at a network where each node is balanced. And then, doing the same replacement here and then canceling the phi term, we're left with this thing here. So these two things are almost identical with the exception that this is a feasible injection vector, but this is the optimal injection vector. Again. So we take the difference of the two. What we want to show is that this minus this is greater than or equal to 0. We pull everything that's associated with the line index in the front, and we're left with the summation over bus indices. Now, if you remember what is the definition of PTDFs, then the flow on a line is exactly equal to the sum over all buses of the PTDF for that line times net injection. So you can replace this whole thing with F star minus a feasible flow. Okay, by the definition of PTDFs. And here's a nice part. Why is this thing non-negative? You should think of two cases here. Let's look at a single line. There's three things that could happen with a single line. It could be congested in the positive direction, not congested, or congested in the negative direction. If it's congested in the positive direction, is this term positive or negative? Well, let's start from an easier question. If a line is congested in the positive direction, is this term positive or negative? F is just a feasible flow over the line, but F star is the optimal solution. If a line is congested in the positive direction, the F star has to be equal to the thermal limit of the line. Any feasible flow has to be smaller than that, so this term is non-negative. Now, if a line is congested in the positive direction, the lambda plus, that constraint is active, its dual multiplier is greater than or equal to 0, and we know that the opposite direction constraint is slack, so the lambda minus is 0. So it's something non-negative times something non-negative. The other way around. If this is equal to minus the thermal limit, then this term has to be a non-positive term. This has to be 0. And this is going to be, the lambda minus is greater than or equal to 0. So this whole thing is less than or equal to 0. So negative times negative is non-negative. So basically that gives you the revenue adequacy result. We just showed that if the FTRs, the way you allocate these rights is such that you respect Kirchhoff's laws and thermal limits, your auction will always give you enough cash to pay for the obligation. Okay. Any questions with this? Okay. Last, okay. Last thing to mention about FTRs and why they're so cool. You can plug them into a market and a control room and not change anything. What I just described in this process here, the only thing that changed is we ran an auction before real time, and then there was a secondary market. But the control room, for the control room, nothing, absolutely nothing has changed. In the control room, the holders of the FTRs can bid in as they would if they did not have the FTRs. The control room will solve economic dispatch as if the FTRs did not exist. And I showed you earlier that no matter what FTRs we buy in the past, our behavior in real time will be efficient. It's as if we don't hold them. And that's contrary to physical transmission rights, which was another proposition where the holders of in physical transmission rights, if you do not use the right, nobody can use the right. So in physical transmission rights, if the holder of the PTR forgets to use the line, nobody can use it for them. So that creates inefficiency because the trade that happened in the past screws up what's going on in real time. That's not the case with FTRs. FTRs are just transfer of cash, but what you actually do in real time does not change. And at the same time, nothing changes in real time in terms of efficiency, but the ISO that originally sold these has information about what will happen in the future, depending on how people bought FTRs. The ISO can make a forecast about people's intention to use lines. So it gives information, but doesn't take away efficiency. Okay. So the second financial instrument I wanted to talk about today are callable forward contracts, right? And the reason I'm covering these is because of their importance for bringing demand response into the game. Before talking about what callable forward contracts are, I'll define for you call options. And what callable forwards are is a combination of a forward contract and the call option. So, like with all other financial instruments we've seen, a call option is a piece of paper that has nothing to do with how the system is operated in real time, but it is a promise of somebody giving cash to somebody else. And in particular, what a call option is characterized is an expiration date and the strike price K. It's sold by a seller in the past to some buyer. And what it involves is the following payments. The seller buys the call option in the past. The buyer buys the call option before real time. And the seller of the call option is obligated to pay the buyer the difference between real time price minus the strike price, if this difference is positive. So again, a call option is associated with an underlying commodity. We've seen this over and over. Forward contracts are associated with a commodity. FTRs are associated with a commodity. Call options are associated with a commodity. You track the real-time price of a commodity, and somebody has to pay somebody else some amount of money that depends on the price of the commodity in real time. This time, the payment is this term here. If the commodity is more expensive than this strike price, so I should make this a capital K here. I'll correct that and upload it. Then the seller of the call option needs to actually pay some money. If the real-time price is below strike price, then nobody needs to pay anybody anything. So this is what the payoff looks like. And again, if the real-time price is bigger than the strike price, we pay the difference. So why do call options exist? What are they good for? They basically enable, they give the guarantee to the buyer of the call option to, they give a guarantee that no matter what happens, they can get a commodity for at most $K, the strike price. If I'm nervous about what the price of electricity will be a year from now, I can buy call options that make sure that no matter how high the electricity prices are a year from now, I won't have to pay more than the strike price. Okay. To see how this, why it works this way, you think about the two possibilities. If the real-time price is less than K, I can go in the real-time market and buy the electricity. But if real-time price is bigger than K, the strike price, because I'm holding a call option, I know that the seller of the call option will pay me P minus K. I get that amount of money, I walk into the spot market, I buy the commodity for P, so I end up basically paying K for buying the commodity. So this is the function of call options, and that's why they're so popular and they're such popular hedging instruments. The difference with forward contracts that we saw is that here the buyer has the right but not the obligation, whereas in forward contracts you will buy basically the commodity at the forward price. And okay, so what is a callable forward? It's the combination of selling a forward contract, but then also buying a call option. So it's the bundling of these two financial instruments, which basically, I'll show you what that means in terms of why it's useful. So the setup is exactly the same. In terms of the definitions, it's almost exactly the same as it was for a call option. The only difference is the payoff term. So seller sells a callable forward to a buyer. There's a strike price and an expiration date associated with the callable forward. And in real time, the seller pays the buyer the minimum of real-time price and strike price. So the payoff diagram looks something like this. So basically here, the function of a callable forward is it enables the seller of the callable forward to not have to supply the commodity if the real-time price of the commodity is too expensive. So okay, from the point of view of the buyer, when they buy this contract, if the real-time price is below the strike price, they get paid in real time, the real-time price. They can take that amount of cash and walk into the spot market and buy the commodity. But if the real-time price of the electricity is higher than the strike price, they get a compensation of $K from the seller of the callable forward, but they don't actually get the electricity. If the real-time price is higher, the payoff will be K. So if they also wanted the electricity, they would have to walk into the spot market and buy it at a really high real-time price. So you can think of a callable forward as a guarantee that you will either get the electricity, or if the price of the electricity is too high, at least you will get $K as liquidated damages, basically. That's the function. And that's exactly what demand response, this is exactly appropriate for demand response customers. By buying callable forward contracts, they have the guarantee that they will either get the electricity or a compensation of K in the future. Okay, so as a financial instrument, from the point of view of consumers who want to consume electricity, it's an interesting financial instrument. Okay, so let's think of how of the valuation of callable forward contracts. So this is pretty similar to the exercise we did for the valuation of forward contracts. So we will want to study how the price of a callable forward depends on the strike price, K. So the first thing we do is we define the CDF of the real-time price based on information that is available in the past, in a time little t that's before real-time, less than capital T. And we will assume that there is also a density function associated with this CDF, with the cumulative distribution function. Now, assuming that we price financial instruments based on their expected payoff, which, basically that's quite intuitive. If you have a market with risk-neutral market agents, when I'm, for example, selling to you a forward contract, the reasonable price for the forward contract is what I think the real-time price is. If I'm selling that forward contract below what I expect will be the real-time price, I'm basically probably losing money. If I'm selling it above, I will find no buyer out there because they will be losing money. So the assumption here is that we're pricing the financial instruments based on their expected payoff. For a forward contract, the price is the integral of the payoff times the density. For a callable forward, the payoff is the minimum of real-time price and strike price. Okay? So let's see how the density and the callable forward price depend on each other. First of all, obviously, if I have an opinion about real-time prices in the future, so distribution, if I have a little q sub t, then I can price a callable forward for strike price K. I can just do this computation. That's a reasonable price for the callable forward. But this works the other way around as well. If I know the distribution of prices of callable forwards for different strike prices, I basically know the opinion of the market for the price of the commodity, which is little q. So if I know Jt of K, I can determine Qt of P. To see this, let's do the calculus. So integrating by parts, I'm basically taking this formula here and so this is going to be min of P comma K times Qt of P. I evaluate at infinity minus, evaluate, I should probably use this notation here. So the integral of this, which is capital Q, minus min of p comma k, the derivative of this times pt of p pp from 0 to infinity. This is just integration by parts of this thing here. Is this clear, or did I? We're good? Integration by parts. Okay. How much is this? QT is the CDF. So cumulative distribution function. KO. Okay. And 0, right? So this goes away. So we're left with k minus this. Now, this is as a function of p, this is something that's going linearly up to k and then flattens out. So basically, it's this. By the argument? Or did I actually? I'm not having erased that. Okay. So it's basically this thing here, which is what? Yeah. So this should be. Sorry. That's the integration by parts from. It's the integral of this function. Okay. So this is what we get over here. And all I'm doing here is bringing the k into the integration. So now I take partial derivatives twice with respect to the strike price, and I arrive at this formula over here. So you tell me, you tell me price of callable for different strike prices. I can tell you the PDF of real-time prices. So I can tell you what the market thinks about real-time prices. Okay. But there's a couple of interesting properties from these equations that we derive. First one is the price of callables as a function of the strike price is non-decreasing and concave in K. Price of callables is non-decreasing with respect to K, so this follows from this equality here. The derivative with respect to K, the price, is something greater than or equal to 0 because capital Q is a CDF, it can't be above 1. So as I'm increasing K, the price of a callable forward increases. Does that make intuitive sense for you? K is the strike price of the callable forward. Remember what a callable forward is. It's a promise to give you the electricity or pay you damages, which are K. Of course, if we agree on a higher strike price, the value of the callable forward is going to be greater. A callable forward with a call option on $40 is less valuable than one with $100. If I promise to give you $100 as compensation, that's more valuable to you as a buyer. Okay, so price of callable is increasing with respect to the strike price. At the same time, it's a right. So this second partial is negative because this is something that's greater than or equal to 0. So it's also a concave function of the strike price. Okay. Second observation: price of the callable is less than or equal to the damages I pay. Is that intuitively clear? Would you ever buy a callable that is priced above the strike price? You wouldn't.
No, I won't pay. Because there is no reason to have code if you have a code because of exactly the strike price.
Exactly. It's not going to ever pay you more. Exactly. So, from our formulas, that follows from this equation here. So, I'm running this integral up to k, but I'm losing some at each dp I'm losing a bit. So this thing is less than or equal to k, or actually just follows immediately from here. Third observation, as the strike price becomes arbitrarily large, a callable forward is basically the same thing as a forward. Why? Because prices will never really become above infinity, so what I can expect as a holder of a callable forward is basically the minimum of P and K, which is going to be P. Basically, that's exactly what a forward does. It pays you P. So that follows from, the definition here. This term converges to P, so this integral is the same as the forward contract. Okay. So we arrived at 3 intuitive properties about the prices of callables. Now, why are they interesting? They're interesting to create businesses for smart loads around them, on the one hand, and also they provide the right incentives. So consumers, we will show this, choose the right callable forward. And also you can have secondary markets for callable forwards in the same way that you have secondary markets for FTRs, in the same way that you have secondary markets for forward contracts. So that is, they're liquid. Okay, and why are they useful for integrating demand response? Okay, first of all, the idea is that the ISO will sell callable forwards, and the idea is that the ISO will sell them specifically to loads. Generators don't really have any reason to buy callable forwards. Why would the ISO want to do that? That's a really important. It's really helpful for planning the system in the future. If I can have all my buyers buy some kind of callable forward, I can basically, I basically know how much generation capacity I need to plan for the future. Why? Because if the price of supplying the power to the loads becomes too high, I can always activate my callable forward contract and not give them the power. So I don't need to build more capacity than the amount of callables. So the ISO really can substantially benefit from selling callable forward contracts. On the other hand, loads can also benefit from buying callable forward contracts, because no matter what happens with the electricity in real time, they always receive their valuation for power, provided they buy a callable forward with K equal to their valuation. So think of a load with valuation of, say, $500 per megawatt hour. In the real-time market, if the load bids truthfully, well, let's say $100 per megawatt hour. If the load bids truthfully and the clearing price is below $100 per megawatt hour, that load will be in the money. They will get the power. How valuable is the power to them? It's $100 per megawatt hour. But if the price of electricity is higher than 100, so for example, if the real-time market clears at $120 per megawatt hour, that load is interrupted. Its bid is out of the money. They cannot consume power. That will hurt them by $100 per megawatt hour. If that same load were holding a callable forward contract, they would have been paid. And if they had chosen that callable forward contract to be equal to $100 per megawatt hour, it's the same to them whether they consume the power or not. If they consume it, they get the full benefit of consuming the electricity, which is $100 per megawatt hour. If they don't consume it, they get the payment of the callable forward from the ISO, which is $100 per megawatt hour. So whether they Whether the real-time price is above 100 or below, doesn't matter to them, they get the same benefit, basically. Okay, so this is a really interesting proposition from the point of view of a consumer. And so there's a mutual desire here to define these contracts and trade them. So the question is now, when the ISO sets up a market for these contracts, they will want to issue multiple versions of these contracts that depend on the strike price. So they might want to issue a callable forward for a strike price of $100, a callable forward for a strike price of $200, and so on. Question is, well, what we ideally want to have happen is we want to have loads by a callable forward that is exactly equal to their valuation. So what we're going to show next is that if a load has a valuation V, they, out of this menu of options, they will select the callable with a strike price equal to V. Okay, so here is how we show that. So the assumption is that we have risk neutral consumers that choose among this menu based on expected payoff. The benefit of buying, so when I'm a consumer and I'm looking at a spectrum of different callable forwards, the only thing that, well, two things change. One is how much I have to pay for them. The other is the chances of me consuming power or not. If I have a callable forward with a higher strike price, there's a higher likelihood that I will consume the power, but I will have to pay more to get the contract. Okay, so basically, in real time, nobody's forcing me, assuming I have a valuation of little v for power, nobody's forcing me to buy a callable forward with strike price k equals v. So I can choose a different callable forward with a different k. The bottom line is that in real time, if the price of electricity is below k, which happens with the probability of capital Q of k, then I consume the power, and that benefit is little v. If the price of electricity is above if the price of electricity is above little k, then I don't get the power, but I get the payment from the system operator, and that's going to occur with the probability 1 minus capital Q. In any case, before real time, I need to buy the callable forward. So basically, the optimization I'm doing as a load when I'm deciding on different Ks is solving this optimization problem over here. Okay, if I get the power, I have a benefit equal to my valuation, which is private information. The operator doesn't know this. And this happens with the probability capital Q. With the probability 1 minus capital Q, I get payment equal to the strike price from the system operator. So to find the optimal K, what we want to basically do is look at how this benefit changes with respect to K. So we take a partial derivative. So one is here. We have partial with respect to J. This comes from there. And then this is first integrating, differentiating this term and then differentiating this term. So we're left with this equality over here. Now, we showed earlier that the partial of J with respect to K is 1 minus capital Q. So these terms all go away. So the partial is V minus K times times little q. As I look how this thing varies for different Ks, I see that I have a local optimum at K equals V. a stationary point at k equals v. And then for k bigger than v, this term is negative. This term is non-negative. So this partial is negative. So for when I choose strike prices bigger than my valuation, my benefit drops. And if I choose strike prices lower than my valuation, the benefit increases. So there's a stationary maximum at k equals v. Bottom line is optimal choice of callable forward is to pick one that's exactly equal to my valuation. So we've just shown that basically loads will self-select once the ISO creates a market with a spectrum of different callable forwards, and loads will organize themselves spontaneously so that they reveal the truth to the system operator. That's great news because in real time, the system operator, if there's a shortage, will start curtailing them. And if the system operator knows the truth about their valuation, the curtailment will be efficient. If I had a load that values callables by 100 but chooses a strike price of 5,000, that load will most likely never be curtailed even if its valuation is very low. So having an instrument that makes loads say the truth about their valuation is important. Okay, so we show that loads self-select the strike price equal to their valuation. And the last thing to mention about callable forwards is you can easily create a secondary market. Why? Because there's only two things that you need to specify about callable forwards. You define a strike price and an expiration date, use the ISO sells the instrument, then people can start trading it easily. It's not like, so futures are the standardized version of forward contracts that have very few specs and many people can trade them, and whereas forward contracts can be much more detailed. It's the same way with callable forwards. There are very few specs, it's easy to trade them in a secondary market. Okay, so that was one instrument that can enable demand response, callable forwards. The other is contracts for reliability. Any questions about this part? Okay. Contracts for reliability are basically the same idea with a different packaging. The way, the end game with all of these, the purpose of all of these financial instruments is to have loads give you an indication about how much they want electricity years before running the network. If you know that, you know how much generation to build. If you don't have that kind of information, you're kind of planning your network in the dark. So with callable forwards, we did that for a strike price. With reliability contracts, we do it through by selling power with different reliability levels. So before defining for you the financial instruments, I'll first define system reliability. It's basically passing the demand function through this capital F of L. So what is the demand function? This is basically what we've seen all throughout the course. It's the block with loads. And this is typically information. This is large-scale system-wide information. This is information that the system operator knows about their network. They might not know how much each of you need power, but aggregate information like The distribution here is known from operating the network day to year to year. Then the other function here, f of L, is defined as the probability of being able to satisfy up to capital L megawatts. So this is also, I have a mix of generators in my network. There are failure probabilities for each of them. I know what this probability distribution looks like. So let's look at a specific example that we've already seen before. If you remember this network, I used this example in the forward contracts lecture. We have a network with two technologies. One is 295 megawatts and it's completely reliable. The other is 1880 megawatts, but sometimes it fails. And this is a Markov chain describing its failure. And I forgot to put the numbers here. So I need to fix that with the slides. So the chances of failing from being on are 10%. So at any given hour that I'm on, there's a 10% chance that I might not be available for the next hour. And the chances that once I fail, I'm able to start up again is 50%. So if at a given hour I'm off, there's a 50-50 chance that I can repair the generator for the next hour. Okay. What is the stationary distribution for this Markov chain? Have you done Markov chains? Do you remember the formula for the stationary distribution?
You have to multiply the matrix, the order is
right. So the formula
it's P parcels, the matrix times
the other way around. Well, I mean, dependent. Yeah, you can transpose it. Yeah, it's the same. So if this is the transition probability matrix, then this is the formula for the stationary distribution. Okay. In our case, the states are off and on. I mean, I might be wrong here, but I think this is like 7 years ago, but I think this is the formula for the stationary distribution. Then the transition probability, so from on to on, it's 90%. From on to off, it's 10%. From off to on, it's 50%. This is an overdetermined system, so then you need to also add an extra constraint that. So these two are linearly independent, no, and this has to be put by off. And then you also need to have that. So these two linear inequalities are linearly independent. So then you need to add also a condition that is this Chinese or
just that the inverse of for P off and P on for the transition matrix.
yes, you're right. Thanks. Okay. So then you have this quite immediate full rank system. So if you solve that, this is the stationary condition of my system. What is F of L? Remember, agree? Yeah. does this L megawatts? L. So what does this function look like for this system? It's a function of L. And there are three crucial quantities, three breakpoints. For L from 0 to, when is it 1? Up to what level of demand am I sure that I can have enough power to make the flight? It is how much?
No.
And I have a typo here, so this should be on. Okay, I'll fix that also. And the rest is 0. Okay, so this is the F of L. So then this R of V, well, I need to tell you what the demand function of the system is. The interpretation of this function is the probability of being able to satisfy loads with a valuation up to V. So the demand function, we've seen this example before. The demand function is 1620 minus 4V. So what should this be? And for what valuations can I be sure I can give enough power? Who are my most luxurious customers? How much do you need to be willing to pay to make sure you belong in the luxury customers? The way to think of the V function is strips of customers. Okay, so we have a strip of super luxury customers that are willing to pay a whole lot of money, then really high-end customers but willing to pay a bit less, and so on, and it goes down like this. And the formula is 1620 for V. So who gets, what's the valuation that gets 100% reliability? Who belong to the super reliable plan?
You need to pay more than 1620 minus 4 times 200.
Exactly. So that is $331.25. Those guys get, well, then there's no reason to look beyond $405 because there's nobody who wants to pay more than that. Okay. Now, if you are if you're kind of cheap, and your valuation is between anything between 0 and 331.25, it turns out you fall in this category over here. even the cheapest guy, even the guy whose V is 0, comes, he's the 1620th megawatt of load. So even the cheapest guy can be covered by the unreliable unit. Okay. So even the cheapest guy will get a reliability of 83.3%. Okay. That's that. So is this function clear? This stuff happening in the okay, so this is the service reliability of the network, and again, the interpretation is you tell me valuation, how much you're willing to pay, I tell you what's the chances of you getting that power. And we've defined this function as a function of stuff that the system operator knows about the network. It's aggregate information. Now, we're going to create a contract of I sell you power, but with some reliability. I might not be actually able to give it to you in real time. If you want higher reliability, you'll have to pay me more. So we'll create a range of contracts that this time the differentiating factor is reliability of service, not strike price. But if you think about it, it's kind of the same thing. When we were choosing strike prices earlier as loads, we were whenever real-time price went above the strike price, the system operator would shut us down. So whether we choose a strike price or a reliability level, the idea is the same. Okay, so this is the contract that I'm defining for you. We have the seller of the reliability contract with reliability level R, and that seller makes a promise to give power with probability R. The buyer of the contract pays something to buy the contract, and they accept the chance that they might not get power. But the higher the reliability they want, the more they need to pay. Okay, so there's no payments now involved in real time. It's just a promise to give you power. Okay. So this is the definition of a reliability differentiated contract. The question now is, the idea will be that the system operator will sell these to loads, and the system operator needs to design this menu of contracts. So different reliability levels, different prices. Higher reliability level makes sense. You price the contract higher. So here's a question for you. Would it make any sense to make this a decreasing function of R? It's like buying cell phone. When you want more minutes, you need to pay more. If I sell you a cell phone plan where you need to pay €100 for 5 minutes and €50 for 100 minutes, everyone's going to go with it. Okay, so there's no point here of selling something, creating a menu which is decreasing in R. Everyone will go to the highest R. Okay, so it's obviously has to be increasing in R. Question is, what should be the exact value? Okay, suppose I design a contract that satisfies these two properties over here. 10 more minutes. And let's think now of what is the optimization problem that a load is solving when they're choosing a reliability load. They have a family of contracts. Yeah. So they're doing an optimization. Their optimization is basically the benefit they get in real time, which is the probability of getting service times their valuation of power, that's private information, minus the price they have to pay for the contract. If they So they're trying to optimize this functional over reliability level. They know their V, the ISO doesn't. The ISO can only design the P of R. So as we're looking at how this thing changes with respect to reliability level, the differential of the first term with respect to the reliability level is V. So if I design a contract that satisfies this condition here, then a load who has an evaluation of V will find it optimal to pick a reliability level R of V, because that's where this function, the way it changes with respect to R, has a local optimum. Okay, so assuming I design my contract to satisfy this condition here, first of all, it's worth me buying the contract. Second of all, if I have valuation V, I will choose reliability level R of V. Again, I want to enter the contract. I want to buy some contract because this is better than buying nothing, and the optimum is at R of V. So this is, this is an important property. Basically, the system operator would like to design a menu like this because that means that people will self-organize themselves in a way that the ISO, who's selling these commitments, can actually satisfy them. When I designed this, I should have completed the description of the function here. So, and when I, the system operator, were calculating my R of V, I know how much service I can give to different classes of customers. So when I'm designing my menu, I would like to design it in such a way that they pick the right class. And to achieve that, we basically design a menu that satisfies this condition. So we know what the conditions of the menu that we want to design are. So what we're going after ultimately is this function P of R. What should it be? It should be something that decreases with R, but what exactly increases with R, but what exactly should it be? Well, I know it needs to satisfy these two conditions over here. Okay, so how can I actually compute this function P of R? Well, to compute it, we're going to define an auxiliary function which is P of R of V. This will just help out with the computation. And so when I'm looking, so basically the way to think about this P hat of V is it maps, you tell me evaluation, I'm going to tell you what your reliability contract price will be. How does this thing change with respect to valuation? When we're taking the differential here, we do applying the sorry, my English is failing me. Composition. Applying the property of differentiation with respect to composite function, we get this here. So we first differentiate with respect to R, and then times the differential with respect to R. But we want to go after this condition, so we can just replace this by valuation V. So this is how this function evolves with respect to valuation. So to design our menu, we just integrate this with respect to V. What we get is a constant term plus the integral over here. Now, we are in great shape to actually construct our menu of contracts because now we have all the information we need to design this P hat of V. The system operator just needs to know how reliability changes with higher valuations. But the system operator already knows that. Why? Because the system operator knows this function R of V. So let's look at our specific example again. Well, before looking at the example, one last thing to mention is there's one degree of freedom in designing this menu, which is the constant term. As I'm pushing this term higher, if you think about it, it's basically, again, P hat of V is the amount of money a customer with valuation V needs to pay for a liability contract. So if you add this P0 to all these contracts, it's like a fixed charge that everyone pays. You kind of have these in cell phone plans as well, right? You have, all plans have like a fixed payment that even if you are the lowest end customer, even the lowest end customer pays a fixed charge. Now, if I push this term higher and higher, I can earn cash from anybody who wants to buy a plan, but people who don't really want telephone service are not even going to buy a plan. So by choosing this P0, I can earn more cash, but I'm throwing away part of the market, the people with really low valuation. That's the idea. And so basically the formula that tells me how many people are going to join these contracts is this one here. The last one to join in will have a zero benefit from buying the plan. What's the benefit of buying the plan? It's the probability of getting service times the valuation minus the fixed charge. So as I'm choosing P0, I'm throwing out of the market anyone who has a valuation below V0. Okay, so let's look at our example. Enough said in the abstract. Again, this is the formula we derived over here for reliability as a function of V. Now, suppose that I want to go only after the customers who are willing to pay, well, no reason in going it. Suppose I want to only go after the customers who are willing to pay $10 or more for this thing. The rest of them I don't care. I'm going to throw them out of the market. So from the formula over here, to come up with how much the fixed charge should be, I plug in $10 per megawatt hour times reliability for $10 per megawatt hour. How much is reliability for $10 per megawatt hour? It's 10 is in this interval here, so the P0, the fixed charge I need to apply is 10 times 0.833, which comes out to $8.3. Again, so this is the fixed charge I want to apply if I want to throw everybody out with a valuation below 10. And then I use this formula over here to design my menu. Fixed charge is going to be $8.3, and it's going to start increasing as the reliability is higher and higher. It increases according to this relationship. R of U is flat everywhere except at 331.25. At 331.25 it has a jump of 17.7%. So this P hat of V is a flat function except at 331.55 where you get a jump and then it's a flat function again. So if you do this integration, you basically get this formula over here. The jump is 16.7, so it's the difference over here, times the U. Okay? So what you get is a plan like this, basically. You have two options in this menu, depending on whether you're a low-end customer or a luxury customer. Well, when I'm selling this as a package of reliability, I need to translate this to a P of R. This is a P hat of V. Now we need to translate it to P of R. And that just comes from the definition from equation 10. So customers who are in the low end get a service reliability of 83.3%. Customers in the high end get a certain 100% reliability. So when I'm marketing these contracts, I sell them as a menu with two options. If you want the low end option, you pay $8.3. If you want the high end option, you pay $63.7. So this is the menu. And what we're going to check next, if we have enough time, is that this menu actually satisfies, and we're out of time. The thing to finish up the analysis, the thing to check is that this menu actually satisfies self-selection. So the question is, we basically have three categories of customers: those that won't ever buy a plan, those that will buy one with low reliability, and those that will buy it with high. You can check by doing the numbers that they will self-organize themselves in the right way. The really cheap ones will indeed go with a no contract. The intermediate ones will not choose the high-end contract. They will go in the middle one. And the really luxurious ones won't choose no contract or crappy contract. They will choose the luxury contract. So you just check that this optimization here follows through. Why did it follow through? Because we designed the menu such that it satisfies these conditions. Okay, so bottom line, they will self-organize. This gives info to the system operator. These achieve the same goal as Callable for